Dog tries to save drowning baby. What happened next is heartbreaking. It was one of those still summer afternoons where the air felt thick with heat, and the backyard seemed almost frozen in time. Debbie sat at the edge of the pool, her legs dangling lazily in the water. She swirled her feet, watching the ripples dance across the surface. Just a few feet away, baby Ben floated gently with the help of a soft foam ring under his arms. He looked so peaceful, so content, his tiny hands waving at the sun as it shimmered through the water. Cooper, their golden retriever, lay nearby in the shade, his head resting on his paws. He'd always been calm, especially around Ben. The two had bonded since the baby was born. Inseparable, in their own quiet way. Cooper would follow Ben from room to room, sleeping beside the crib at night and never straying far. It gave Debbie a sense of comfort, almost like having a second pair of eyes. The stillness was broken by a single sound, an odd whine, low and drawn out. Debbie glanced over. Cooper was standing now, his eyes locked on the pool. His body was stiff, tail lowered, ears twitching. Something in his posture made Debbie sit up a little straighter. She narrowed her eyes, following his gaze. Ben was still floating, still safe. Then, without warning, Cooper sprinted forward. Debbie barely had time to react. Water exploded upward as Cooper leapt into the pool with full force, his body slicing through the surface like a shot. His paws paddled wildly, sending splashes in every direction. Debbie's heart slammed into her chest. For a moment, everything blurred. The sound of the splash, the sun glinting off the water, the sudden movement, it all collided at once. Her breath caught in her throat as she scrambled to her feet. Ben had drifted a little, still floating, but now face down. Debbie screamed. Her voice cracked the quiet of the yard. Her hands trembled as she reached for him. For a split second, it looked like Ben wasn't moving. Cooper reached him first. The dog's snout nudged under Ben's side, pushing him upward. Water sprayed from Cooper's mouth as he barked, once, loud and sharp. The sound echoed off the walls. Debbie lunged forward, her fingers finding Ben's arm, pulling him out of the water and into her chest. Ben coughed once, then again, then let out a startled cry. He was okay. Debbie cradled him, soaked and shaking. Cooper was still in the water, spinning in frantic circles, eyes wide. He wasn't settling. He wasn't relieved. If anything, he looked more terrified now than ever. And in that moment, Debbie realized something wasn't right. Not with Ben, but with Cooper. Not just panic, something deeper, something old. Debbie held Ben tightly against her chest, his wet curls pressed against her neck. His cry had turned into a soft whimper, but his breathing was steady. Her heart still pounded as she backed away from the edge of the pool. Every sound around her seemed distant, muffled, like she was underwater herself. Cooper remained in the pool, swimming in slow, frantic loops. His ears were pinned back, his mouth open, panting between sharp, shallow breaths. He wasn't trying to get out. He wasn't looking at Debbie or Ben. His eyes stayed locked on the center of the pool as if he'd lost something there. Liam came running from the back door, barefoot and wide-eyed. He skidded to a stop on the wet concrete. What happened? Debbie couldn't answer right away. Her voice was stuck behind the lump in her throat. She looked down at Ben, then back at the dog, who was still circling. Cooper jumped in. I thought Ben was drowning. Liam looked over the scene, confused. Ben, now calmer, blinked up at him with that same innocent expression. No water in his lungs, no gasping, just wet skin and a trembling mother. Liam waded into the pool to pull Cooper out, but the dog resisted. He kept glancing back toward the water, swimming toward the far end, then back, over and over, like he was looking for someone who wasn't there. Cooper, come, it's over. But Cooper didn't seem to hear. It took Liam's strong arms to lift him out. The moment his paws hit the ground, the dog shook off the water but then froze, head low, tail tucked. His breathing didn't slow. He looked around as if waiting for something else to happen. Debbie watched him, holding Ben tighter now. Her hands were still shaking. Everything about Cooper's reaction felt wrong. This wasn't the loyal dog rushing to save a baby in trouble. It was something else. His panic hadn't ended once the danger had passed. Because to Cooper, maybe, the danger hadn't passed at all. The backyard, once so peaceful, felt like a completely different place now. The stillness had returned, but it was heavy, uncomfortable, like the air was holding its breath. Debbie sat down with Ben on the patio chair, rocking him gently. Liam brought Cooper a towel, but the dog wouldn't sit. He just paced, back and forth, eyes on the pool, occasionally glancing at Ben, but never for long. It wasn't just overreaction. It was fear. Not the fear of the moment, but something older, something buried, something Cooper had carried with him long before today. Debbie felt her stomach twist as she looked at him. She knew this wasn't about Ben. Something inside that dog had broken open, and she didn't know how to close it again. The house was quiet that night. Too quiet. Debbie sat on the couch holding a warm cup of tea she hadn't touched. Liam had taken Ben upstairs to bed hours ago, but she couldn't sleep. Her eyes were fixed on Cooper, who lay curled in the corner of the room, wide awake. His eyes stayed open, unmoving, reflecting the dim light from the kitchen. He hadn't touched his food. He hadn't wagged his tail once since it happened. Every little sound, a creak in the floor, the tick of the clock, made him flinch. It was like watching something unravel from the inside out. Debbie stared at him, her heart tight. And then, from somewhere deep in her mind, a memory came back. One she had pushed aside, one she had never really talked about. 2 summers ago, a visit to Arizona, a family barbecue, her sister Emily's house. There had been laughter, kids playing in the yard, drinks in hand, food on the grill, and then chaos, screaming, people running, someone shouting the name Max over and over, her nephew, barely 2 years old. She remembered the splash, the shouting, the blur of limbs, and Cooper. He had jumped into the pool before anyone else. He had reached Max before the adults did. He had tried, desperately tried, to lift the little boy's head above the water, but it was too late. Debbie had never forgotten the moment they pulled Cooper out, soaked and shaking. The way he paced afterward, howled when they took Max inside. For weeks after, he barely moved. He sat by the door. He stared at the pool. And when Emily couldn't keep him anymore, Debbie and Liam took him in. They hadn't brought him near water since. Cooper stirred slightly on the floor, adjusting his paws but keeping his eyes locked on nothing. Debbie finally spoke. "You remember, don't you?" Cooper didn't move, but his ears twitched. She set her cup down and knelt beside him, gently placing a hand on his back. His muscles jumped under her touch, tense and coiled. He didn't look at her. His breathing was shallow. "You thought it was happening again." Her voice broke, even in a whisper. Tears slid down her cheeks as she rubbed his side. Cooper didn't react. He just stared ahead, frozen in a moment only he could see. Debbie sat with him until the house faded into silence. Her mind drifted between then and now, between Max and Ben, between a tragedy and what almost was. Outside, the wind picked up slightly, rustling the trees. Cooper didn't close his eyes once. The next morning, Debbie sat at the kitchen table, stirring her coffee without tasting it. Liam leaned against the counter, arms crossed, watching Cooper sleep by the door. It was the first time the dog had rested all night. But even in sleep, his body twitched like he was trapped in a dream he couldn't escape. The house felt unusually heavy. Ben babbled from his high chair, slapping his hands on the tray. His giggle echoed through the room, sweet and innocent, but it only seemed to tighten the knot in Debbie's chest. She looked at Cooper. His ears twitched at the sound, but he didn't lift his head. Later that day, Debbie called Emily. Her sister's voice cracked almost as soon as she answered. When Debbie told her what happened, there was silence on the other end. Then Emily said, barely above a whisper, "He thinks he failed him." Debbie's throat tightened. She couldn't find words. "I never blamed him," Emily added, "but I don't think he ever stopped blaming himself." That evening, Liam set a blanket down on the patio so Ben could crawl safely while Debbie sat by the edge of the pool, her eyes on the water. Cooper lay a few feet back, just watching. His body was still tense, but he didn't move. Every time Ben got close to the pool's edge, Cooper's ears would perk. His body would rise slightly, halfway between standing and freezing. Debbie sat on the tile floor beside him, resting a hand gently on his shoulder. "He's safe," she said. Cooper didn't look at her. He kept his eyes on Ben. Over the next few days, the house revolved around quiet observation. Cooper followed Ben everywhere, not in his usual soft-footed way, but like a shadow on high alert. Anytime Ben made a sound near water, a sink, a bath, even a splash on TV, Cooper would stiffen. His fear didn't fade. It lived in him. One afternoon, as Liam carried Ben toward the pool for a short splash, Cooper lunged between them, barking once, loud, sharp, protective. Liam stopped cold. Ben blinked, startled. Cooper lowered his head but stayed planted between them and the water, his body trembling. Debbie sat down on the step, tears brimming again. It wasn't just instinct. It wasn't just memory. It was heartbreak. This wasn't a dog trying to be brave. This was a dog still grieving. Weeks passed, but the moment never left Debbie's mind. The splash, the panic, the look in Cooper's eyes, it circled her thoughts like water spiraling down a drain. The pool had become a symbol of something they still didn't fully understand. Not fear, exactly, but something deeper, something unresolved. One afternoon, Liam sat at the kitchen counter with his laptop open. He had pulled up the security footage from that day. Debbie sat beside him in silence as they watched it again, frame by frame. Ben floating calmly, Debbie on the edge, Cooper still and alert. Then the shift. Cooper's head lifted, his ears snapped back, his body went rigid. For several seconds, he didn't move. He just stared. Not at Ben, but at the water itself. His breathing changed before he ever took a step. It wasn't the baby that triggered him. It was the light. The way the sun reflected off the surface. Just like that day in Arizona. The glare, the pattern of shadows, the sound of the wind through the trees. The time of day. All of it matched. A perfect storm of memory. Cooper wasn't seeing Ben in the water. He was seeing Max, and he didn't hesitate. Not because he was trying to save Ben, but because, in his heart, he thought he'd been given a second chance to save the boy he'd lost. Debbie sat back slowly, pressing a hand over her mouth. The realization settled in her chest like weight she didn't know she'd been carrying. Cooper hadn't panicked. He had remembered. In his own way, he had gone back in time, and in that moment, what looked like fear had actually been love. Unresolved, unspoken, and still raw. From that day forward, something changed. They didn't avoid the pool. They invited healing to it. Cooper began sitting closer to the water again. Not always, and not for long. But with Ben nearby, he seemed to settle. Ben learned to splash with Cooper beside him, one hand on the dog's fur, giggling every time the water sprayed. Cooper no longer barked. No more pacing. No more flinching at reflections. He had come to understand, in his own quiet way, that this child was safe, and so was he. By the end of summer, Ben stood wobbly on the pool steps, arms raised, Cooper beside him like a steady wall. Debbie watched them from the patio, the sun setting behind them. The same sun that had once brought back a storm of memory now warmed them both in stillness. Cooper turned and looked at her. This time, his eyes were calm.